Hi everybody, my name is Victoria. Welcome back to my channel. And today we are combining our wrap-up and our October TBR. I only read 3 books in September, and one of the books, technically I didn't even read in September. I finished it August 31st or 30th. However many days there are in August. You may have remembered me saying that I wouldn't do any monthly TBRs anymore. I changed my mind. I figure I'll probably continue this wrap-up and TBR style. That way you can at least see kind of what's on the horizon for my reading. The first book that I have to wrap up is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Farseer trilogy. I read this as a part of Michael Knipp's Patreon. This was his first buddy read since he's started his Patreon, so I of course wanted to participate, and this was so good. I had owned this series for a little while. I got it at a used bookstore at some point, and I had just been hanging on to it for a rainy day. But that was a dumb thing to do because this was really, really good. What I loved most about this is the whole atmosphere. Hobb's prose is fantastically beautiful, but not so flowery that you lose the story or that it really bothers you. It's just good writing. She really knows how to set kind of this dark, moody tone for her fantasy novels. In this story, we follow a young character named Fitz, and we follow him from childhood, and this whole series is about him growing up and his various experiences and what makes Fitz special. He has a few things that make him special, and we won't get into it too much because that's part of what you learn in the book while you read it. But one thing that's pretty apparent from the title is that he's going to be trained as an assassin. Throughout the book, they refer to him as a bastard. He is a son of a prince, and because he has this sort of claim to the throne, they decide to take him into the castle, the keep, and he becomes part of the inner life of the kingdom. However, of course, there's a lot of politics surrounding him. There's a lot of people that don't want him to be there, and so he grows up with a pretty difficult life, and it's all about how different people are being mean to him. No, I'm just kidding. It's not completely about that, but there are a lot of people who are just not very nice to him, and he has quite a few, let's say, traumatic experiences. Those parts of the book were definitely hard to read, but they just make Fitz feel like such a real character, and your heart goes out to him and everything he's going through. You want him to be okay, but people just keep stepping on his toes, and I have a feeling he's going to make a comeback if I know anything about fantasy trilogies. This was a really enjoyable read from start to finish. There's a little bit of a more slow-moving pace to it, I would say, compared to something like Brandon Sanderson, which I've been reading a lot lately, so everything to me ends up being compared to Brandon Sanderson. But I think just the general pace took a little bit of time to get from point A to point B, so some people may notice that more than others. I really enjoyed taking the time with him because it does feel like we're growing up with him and we are moving in real time with him. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I can't wait to continue. I feel really bad because now I'm a whole month behind the Patreon. They already read the second book, so I'm going to try and get caught up so that I can sort of be on schedule. It may or may not happen, but I'm really looking forward to continuing in this, especially after what I've heard Michael say and some other people say about how much they liked the second book. So now I'm just really chomping at the bit to get to that book. This next book very nearly put me into a reading slump. Maybe it kind of did, but that's Middlemarch by George Eliot. This was a buddy read with Naomi from Naomi's Bookshelf. We've actually been buddy reading together since March because we've been reading The Lord of the Rings together, and then we decided to pick up another book in August, so we actually took 2 months to read this. I've really enjoyed buddy reading with Naomi. We've just been tackling some giant books, and she actually has her own separate book review video for this, and a lot of her thoughts echoed mine, so I'm going to link hers down below in case you want to check that out. But both of us really had a hard time with this book. We did not come away from it in love. This was a 2-star book for both of us. And it was really a disappointment because George Eliot is such a foundational Victorian author, and we'd both heard amazing things about her, and a lot of those things are totally warranted, but the execution of this book was so tedious. It was very tedious. The characters are not super likable. There's a couple that we sort of gravitated towards, but overall, it was hard to root for anyone. I felt like we were told a lot of things rather than shown things, and that's always a difficult reading experience. It actually helps to know the background of George Eliot. George Eliot is actually a woman, Mary Ann Evans, I think is the name, and she really wanted to be seen as a serious Victorian writer. She didn't want to follow in the footsteps of like the Jane Austen types, and there was this idea that women wrote romance. And George Eliot really bucked against that idea, and she wanted to write serious literary fiction. So that's a big reason of her pen name. And so she just has a lot of baggage, and that really comes out in this book. She's very skeptical about marriage, about relationships. All of the women in this book are very much taken advantage of. They are victims of their husband's decisions. So this book follows the men a lot and how they are chasing their own ambitions. They are putting a really high stake on their, vocation? Why couldn't I remember that word? And the women are just kind of along for the ride, and the women have to suffer the consequences of what the men decide. So that comes out a lot in this book. It's a great basis for a book. It's a great concept, but her outlook on everything is just so negative, which, you know, if you were living in the Victorian times as a woman, maybe you would be really negative about life, especially if you had a bad experience with husbands and just with the whole patriarchy. But that's a big part of this book. Another big part of this book is the politics and the way the politics are shaping the social ways that they interact. So I think there's actually quite a bit of background that you need to go into Middlemarch and to appreciate it and understand it. I have to confess I didn't have all of that background. I definitely learned a lot as I went, but the story is very boring. It's very slice of life. Like, we just see a little bit of this person's life and a little bit of this person's life, and the chapters bounce around between different people in the town of Middlemarch, and it's just supposed to be a tapestry of this town and their drama and how they deal with everything. It's not a super happy book. It is very philosophical. It raises a lot of questions. Those are all good things. I don't want to say that I didn't like it for those things. I liked those things. But the execution of it, the story just didn't go anywhere very quickly. There were just too many characters that I didn't care about, and it was really just hard to motivate myself to read this. This started to feel like a school assignment where I was hating it, but I had to read it, and I never enjoy those experiences. However, I'm glad that Naomi and I buddy read this because we both were kind of able to like spur each other on, and we did finish it. We have this big tome under our belt. This is like 800 pages or so. I think her copy was a little bit longer, even over 800 pages. Mine is just about 800, but this was quite an undertaking. I will read George Eliot again in the future, but probably a shorter book would be better. I know Kate Howe has spoken highly of Daniel Deronda, so that might be the next one that I consider reading by George Eliot. But this was a little bit of a warm-up for Victober, so we feel like we're ready to dive into more Victorian literature in the coming month. But this book sits at a 2-star rating for me. A bit of a disappointment. But you know, a book that wasn't a disappointment, Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. We are reading the Stormlight Archives for Stormalong 2020. It is a readathon. I will link info down below just in case you haven't heard about it. But this was so good. I don't even really know how to talk about it because I don't want to give you any spoilers. So I really can't go into any plot or character or anything. But I do want to say what I liked about this book and how it was constructed and how I thought The Way of Kings just really was able to set up this book really well. The Way of Kings is slow for a while and then things start to happen, and this book just picks up where that left off. So it's very fast-paced, much more fast-paced than the first book. It also is very funny. It has a ton of humor in it that I didn't expect. Brandon Sanderson really flexes his humor muscles quite a bit in this book. The reveals are really pretty consistent and constant in this book, so it's really easy to just keep reading and keep reading and keep reading. This was just such a fun romp of a book. Even though it's really long, it honestly doesn't feel that long because it's so consumable. It's so bingeable of a book. You probably could tell, but it's a 5-star book for me, and I cannot wait to talk about this in more spoilery details at our live stream this Thursday. If you've been following along, I hope that you're able to come because we would love to chat with you about all the crazy things that happen in this book. Okay, so now let's talk about October. There are so many fun October read-alongs and readathons, and I get a little bit overwhelmed when I see all of the different possibilities. And so in response to that, apparently I'm just going to ignore a lot of them, even though I want to participate in all of them also, but I just get overwhelmed by them. So a lot of these books are part of a readathon, but I'm trying not to overload too much because there are just so many fun ones. And since I've only really been able to get through 2 or 3 books in this last month, I don't want to totally set unrealistic expectations, but I do have 7 books on this TBR. So the unrealistic expectations are already set. First up, I'm going to be finishing Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I'm excited about this. This is one of the read-alongs that I'm doing, and I am going to be talking about parts 2 and 3 this weekend, this Saturday, with Danny from Spinelli Speaks, and also Ramsey from Rajathon, and Ange from Ange with an E. And we're going to be having a live stream discussion about parts 2 and 3 of this book. If you want to follow along and jump in, I'll link that info down below. It's not too hard to catch up. I found this book to be very readable, much more readable than I thought it was going to be. At the moment, I still need to finish part 3 of this book. I'm kind of in the middle of part 3. But liking this quite a bit. After having kind of a bad experience with the classic with Middlemarch, this has been nice to pick up because it is shorter, first of all, and also a little bit more easily readable, easier to follow along with, and also perfect for Halloween vibes. It's about a murder, and it's got a very spooky fall vibe to it. So it's really the perfect time to read this. Next up, this is probably way too optimistic, but I would love to finish the Robin Hobb Farseer trilogy. That's probably not going to happen. But what I hope happens is at least to finish the second book, Royal Assassin. If I could do that, I will be happy, and then I'll just be a month behind everybody else, and I'll finish this in November. But if I could at least finish the book 2 in October, I would be pretty thrilled. Next up, also a read-along for Michael Knipp's Patreon, is The Shining by Stephen King. And I'm really stoked about this because I actually suggested this one, and it ended up being the one that got picked. So I have to follow through with this since this is the one that I suggested. I was already planning on reading this in the month of October. I already love the movie, so I'm going to be very interested to see how this is different. I know that Stephen King and the maker of the movie, now I can't remember his name, I know that they didn't super vibe together on this, and that the movie is very different than the book. I know that the book obviously can go into things a lot deeper, but I've heard that the movie also takes a lot of liberties that Stephen King wasn't happy with. So I'm planning on doing a vlog video of my experience reading this book and also then watching the movie and maybe comparing the two in the vlog. Let me know if that sounds like fun to you, but that's kind of my plan for this book. So hopefully you'll have a The Shining vlog from me at the end of the month. This is actually only my second Stephen King book that I'm reading. I've only read the Tommyknockers before, and I'm excited because I did really like the Tommyknockers, and I love a lot of Stephen King movies. I've seen countless Stephen King movies, so it only makes sense that I would be a fan of the books as well. So here's hoping. Also a read along that's happening in Michael Nip's Discord, this time Discord, not Patreon. So if you're not a Patreon of Michael's, then you can do this also, and there's no timeline for it, but we're reading To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. A lot of people have finished it. I haven't even started it. I know Ryan from Seeking Stories is also towards the beginning of this book right now, so I'm hoping to read it along with his video series. I know he's talked about doing a video series where he's talking about certain chunks of the book as he goes, so I would like to be able to kind of follow along with those. I'm incredibly nervous about this one because I've heard some mixed things. Most of the things I've heard are not positive, so I'm a little bit worried. This is maybe going a little bit lower on the priority list than I had initially intended. I initially thought I was going to pick this up right away, but now I'm not so sure. I think I'm going to prioritize Robin Hobb first, and then this will be an if I get to it kind of book. It's also massive, so I don't expect to finish this in October. Next up, it is Victober, people. If you don't know what Victober is, info down below. Go check them out. I'm very excited about Victober this year. I have a couple of books planned. We will see how that goes because this is a ridiculous TBR already. But physically, I would like to read Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is a book I know absolutely nothing about other than it is highly praised. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say anything bad about this book. Everyone I've heard talk about it just loves it. And I know it's a lot of people's favorite Elizabeth Gaskell book. I love North and South. That's a book that I also really want to reread. There's so many books I want to reread. But North and South is the only book that I've read of hers so far, and I remember loving it. So Wives and Daughters apparently is maybe even better. It's pretty long. It's a chunky one, so this is only one of 2 Victober books that I'm even considering. So I'm kind of ignoring all of the Victober prompts and just doing my own thing, especially after Middlemarch kind of burned me out a little bit. So I'm hoping this classic is better and that even though it's long, it'll be readable and easy to follow and hopefully just a more joyful book. I'm hoping it's a happy book. Also for Victober, I'm doing an audiobook, shock of all shocks. I tend to not do audiobooks very much, but I'm going to do an audiobook for Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. And I really wanted to do that because Kate Howe is hosting a Jane Eyre read-along, and they're also going to be watching a movie version, which I haven't seen before. So I wanted to be part of that whole experience. Jane Eyre is a reread for me. I've read it twice. This is one of the few books that I've read more than once in my life. That list is pretty short, but this will be the 3rd time that I'm reading Jane Eyre. So I'm excited to listen to it this time, and hopefully I can squeeze it into everything else I'm doing. But because I'm doing an audiobook, I feel pretty confident that I can do this. And then finally, last but definitely not least, really this is the priority read out of all of these, even though I'm mentioning it last. That's Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. I cannot believe that we have reached Oathbringer by now. It almost seemed like a never-ending journey and that we would never get here, but we are here. And then Rhythm of War comes out, and then, oh my goodness, what are we gonna do after that? We're just gonna cry because there won't be any more Stormlight Archives to read. If you would like to read Oathbringer with us, we will be starting this weekend. I'm actually gonna be hosting a read with us weekend, couple hours on my channel, and just do a read with us video. So I know I haven't announced that yet, but I'm announcing it now. So we're going to be doing that. After the live stream for Words of Radiance on Thursday, we're going to be hopping right into this. So I am so excited to continue. There's so much to learn. There's so many questions to be answered. And I just can't wait to be back in the world, back with these characters. Even though it's only been like a week since I've finished Words of Radiance, I still can't wait to jump back into the universe. I should note that we're only reading half of this in October, so it's not that scary if you want to jump in with us. We're taking 2 months. We are finishing our read of Oathbringer a little bit after Rhythm of War comes out, but if you don't mind that, you could even read ahead a little bit more if you really want to read Rhythm of War as soon as it comes out. But we would love to have you. Those are the books that I'm hoping to get to in October. At least read half of some of these. We will see. This is so silly. I can't believe that this is happening, but it's happening. I don't know what makes me think I can read even half of these, but it's never stopped me from trying before. Let me know down below, have you read any of the books that I talked about? And also, are you planning on doing any of these read-alongs? Are you participating in any of these things? October is such a ridiculously busy readathon month. It is honestly overwhelming, and I just decided instead of try to participate in everything, I was just gonna try to do the healthy thing and just pick a few, but even the few, there's just so much fun stuff happening around here, you guys. I'm so excited. Please subscribe if you would like to see more content from me. I would love to get to know you. Please leave me a comment down below. Let me know you were here and you watched the video. I would love to chat about anything and everything. Keep reading great books, and until next time, bye-bye.